Welcome everybody to this week's VVBGA webinar featuring Hans Estrin talking about considerations and lessons learned on root washing systems. Take it away, Hans.
Thanks a lot, Vern. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to have you here. And yeah, tis the season, pulling roots out of the ground, getting them going, and we're diving into some of the considerations and lessons learned. You know, we've been myself, Andy Chamberlain, Chris Callahan, this post-harvest team. We've been out and around to many hundreds of growers around the state and New England and seen lots of different systems and heard lots of different things. So this is a chance for us to throw up some of these, some of the key lessons learned and some considerations. So here we go. And Andy is here, and definitely many of these photos are his. All the good ones are his, you'll know. And I think Chris Callahan has jumped on too and may add some stuff as well.
Hey, Hans, right. I just wanted to remind people that they can put questions in the chat as we go here, and that you'll answer them when you're done.
That's right. And is my sound okay? Everything sound all right? Turn up the volume possibly. Does it sound all right as far as?
Yes.
Okay.
It's good, Hans.
All right. Sounds good. Here we go. Okay. So yes, 'tis the season. There are a lot of, you know, often things are sort of come to a head, and many people are pulling a lot of roots out of the ground and need to process them quickly when they're in good condition. And some people do go all winter, but many don't. So a lot of systems have to be really dialed in and busy harvest time of the year. So today, what we're really going to do is focus on what I'm calling some of the most important considerations that we really got to think about no matter what root system you're designing or putting in place. And then, you know, then actually looking at the systems, and that's the majority of what we're doing today, is looking at a bunch of different systems from tiny, small, almost no cost to the largest ones we have in the state, and some of the lessons learned, and again, pipe up with discussions with question or any kind of discussion topics. We're going to fly because there are a lot of photos. This is kind of like a whirlwind tour that we're all going to get here, and we'll go pretty quickly through a lot of them. Okay, so when any system, and in fact, a lot of post-harvest, almost anything post-harvest, these are real important considerations. First and foremost, flow, good production flow. Everything's moving efficiently in straight lines. The things that product is touching are cleanable, durable contact surfaces, and we're talking about hygienic design here. That's just for everything that is in contact. The design and looking carefully at the products and how long they'll last is real important. Easy access to everything. So you don't want to mess around with trying to find anything. You want to be able to see the product really well. This isn't rocket science, but really important to keep all these 4 things in mind: ergonomics and creature comforts. You know, this is, there's no way you're going to last long, any worker will, washing roots in cold, wet conditions with, you know, bent over and lifting real heavy things. So, you know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now, but when we look at this good production flow, you'll see it in many of these photos. It's not only the equipment, how it's laid out. I don't know if you can see my browser, my arrow here, but it's also that things are moving more or less in lines that don't backtrack. They're either taking U's or going straight. And the quality, the product is, to be efficient, the product has to be not dried up or have dirt dried on it, you know, clean, moist product that's easy to clean. And all these are real important when thinking about design, timing, placement, all of that. Hygienic design will definitely be looking at in many of these photographs. And there's a real, oh, I didn't post it, but maybe in the chat, Andy or Chris, if you could post the link to the blog on hygienic design, that would be great in the ag engineering. So really 5 key principles we're looking at. Visible, reachable surfaces, all of them, they're all cleanable. There aren't collection points. Materials are compatible for what you're doing. So it's, they're not materials that shouldn't be there or going to rot in time. Food safe, and thinking about preventing contamination overall. These photos are from the blog that I think Chris has put out the last couple of years. And Chris, you're welcome to pipe in here, but just flying through it, thinking about one of the big problems with materials is they're really hard to wash. This is a brush washer, I think, over on the left, this photo, and looking in at the kind of surface that there's no way you're going to wash this stuff, never mind the bristles. So being able to access stuff is important, and replacing hard to reach nuts with sort of hand tightened things are a possibility, or even quick release so you can get at and open up stuff and clean it. Looking at carefully at all the materials, the welds, anytime there's points, there's harborage points for when anything overlaps, for moisture and biofilm and bacteria, obviously. Welds are also important. You want to get not intermittent welds, but more smooth, long welds are important. And yeah, the photo on the right is a rinse conveyor, if you haven't seen one, but they've really been designed with hygienic design in mind, easy to clean, easy to take apart, good materials. A lot of, this is not a primary contact surface, this is barrel washer at Jericho Settlers, but just that keeping a close eye at even the secondary points, sort of drains that come up, means it's going to be hard to dry this surface. Materials should be kept and surfaces in good repair, because certainly rust or corrosion is also harbor points for contamination. This clear scene, Chris, did you want to add anyone, or someone want to pipe up?
Yeah, it's a key point of hygienic design is that you can't tell if something's clean unless you can see it, and you can't clean it unless you can see it. So it really serves 2 purposes: just being able to have access and visibility of all your food contact surfaces. That's kind of the key point.
Great, thanks. Okay, and that hygienic design, Andy posted it, a link to the blog post, which goes over this stuff in much more detail. A real excellent presentation. Here's an example of just, light. You might not think this is really important, but here's a barrel washer. You see the light in that upper left corner. That's a halogen, and the windows being there as well. Really important for both, efficiency, getting things through, understanding, when things are clean, quality control, all of that. So in the long run, it's going to be saving time and money and frustration. It's hard to work in a dark space. Ergonomics, creature comfort, really it can't be underestimated. Taking care of yourself and your workers over the long haul so they can take care of the produce. And, something might work for a while, but turnover, if you have some pretty difficult, long, cold, wet sessions that go on and on with bad ergonomics, and those things can really contribute to turnover of crew, not being invested, and then other things the crew's dealing with when they're in those kinds of situations tend to mushroom. So, taking care of your crew, having them help you, figure out what they need. Either you're going to be heating the space, or you're going to have really good protective clothing. Cold and wet conditions can be miserable, as you all know. Well worth the money. This is from Route 5 Farm. Okay, so right equipment. We're going to jump in and spend the rest of the time really thinking about different kinds of root processing equipment, root washing. Not so much looking at some of the auxiliary stuff, all the cleaning equipment, the dealing with sediments, and wash lines, conveyors, those kinds of things. Mostly looking at the barrel, the actual equipment for washing. So it's really complicated. I don't think, there's not one right thing to say or one piece of equipment that's right for all kinds of farms, obviously. But, I think starting with your bottlenecks and constraints, that's really important. What does it look like during the processing time? How many workers do you have? What's the space look like? What's the temperature going to be like? Do you have good clothing? How fast do you need to crank things out? What's your unit type? What are you doing? I mean, is it bunch greens or loose greens? Obviously it's a key decision, and it may be mixed, so you might have to have multiple methods. Unit size could be all over the place. Some of the largest, I think the largest root processor washer in the state does small retail bags, or a lot of them, but they do many of them. So it does make a difference, obviously, and packing wholesale bags, you need big batches or bigger batches to make it worth it with a lot of people to keep the flow good. So that all comes down to production rate and workers and just making things work well. We can't, I was going to try to make a simple logic diagram and quickly realized it was impossible. But a couple of things that we can look at. So we're looking at 4 major categories, I would say, of different root systems. So these spray systems, which are often cables, but they could be racks, they could be other things as well, buckets or baskets, and mostly for one person, or could be more depending on the size of it. 100, 200 pounds an hour you'd be cranking, but it's good for retail, and it is good for when you have a few employees. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. So if you're holding a sprayer, that's a bad idea. You want your hands free. So that's, one thing that is a design consideration, and certainly starting without that is fine too. A lot of bunches, it's good to think about some kind of hands-free. Small batch barrels, we're in the more, they can be expensive, $5,000 to $10,000, but they could be less. Actually, this is for a Wilsey, so certainly the small batch barrels, DYIs could be pretty inexpensive, but they can crank out, an order of magnitude more practically, but often, more like 2 or 3 times more, and batches could be bunched or loose, sort of keep your eyes on things. The bigger barrels obviously can get huge, and some of the highest production lines, 10,000 pounds per hour, I think is what Pete Screens can do with good product with their new system. But they're generally up around 1,000 pounds per hour and take a few people. The rinse conveyor is a nice, a really versatile piece of equipment that is semi-pricey, but it is also very versatile and needs to be dialed in. We'll spend some time looking at that. Okay. So table systems, when you look at the hygienic design, probably the least expensive thing is these Galvi fencing material on top of wood, and that's it's a lot of people use it. It's fine to get started, but definitely is going to have, it's going to be problematic cleaning over time and supporting it well, etc. They're pretty heavy. Also moving them around is difficult. Quality of products, pretty cool. So, pretty important, right? Letting things dry out too much is going to take a lot longer to clean product. This is at Footprint Farm, and you'll notice this rack underneath. Some of you might recognize that as a closet rack, which is true, the thing that goes up above. These are pretty inexpensive. And Andy, maybe you could also post Andy did a great blog on all these different kinds of materials, cost per square foot, etc. So we're just going to peek at a couple of them here.
Already in the chat.
You're awesome, Andy. So when you're thinking about really, doing this in a more serious way, it's worth investing. It's a small footprint of real estate, investing in some kind of surface that's more smooth and cleanable. This is a slight upgrade, obviously. This is extruded metal, I believe. This and more cleanable, more durable, but it does also have wood underneath, and it's not so easy to adjust, and that's at Joe's Brook Farm. These plastic racks are pretty inexpensive, can be moved around, but usually they need to be modified ergonomically and also often with spray backs, etc. So that just depends on how you're washing things, what your systems are like. So this is returning to this closet rack here at Footprint Farm, because they do a lot of retail and a lot of bunches, and they're doing dunking, but they end up also using these racks both to spray outside, but you can also dunk bunches and spray them at the same time. So it's a pretty versatile system. And of course, it's also hung right nearby, so this gets at sort of the light, everything, easy access, good material. The ergonomics of this are, can be adjusted. This leaning over the rack could be a downside, but it works pretty well. So hands-free, how do you get there? And typical hose, it's difficult to think about how to have some kind of foot pedal or something to turn this on. So a lot of people have gone, this is Jamie Gildrian. Is his first name? No, I'm forgetting. I haven't seen him in a while. Gildrian Farm. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the foot pedal, but definitely got the hands-free part, and this is a fairly easy solution, sort of garage sale desk lamp arm, or some kind of an arm that you can mount something on and just keep it on a low flow and work product that way. It's fast, but uses a fair bit of water. Here's a crazy homestead design from, of course, from Portland, Oregon. Where else? Kelly Wood, who's a homesteader. I just saw this on the internet. Not great hygienic design, right? With this carpet mat, can't really been cleaned. I mean, you could disinfect it probably in a tub or something, but it does hook up to a hose, and there's little spray nozzles across the top. And so this is a constant spray and has the ability to crank the produce bunches back up at the same time to get underneath them. I don't have any good photos of this, but if you go online and look at this bunch watcher from Sister Hills Farm, it's a great video kind of showing how this setup works. And this is really a Cadillac. They've taken durable, good high pressure motors in a bucket, height adjustment, and this three-way sprayer under sort of high pressure but light flow, and a pedal. And this thing costs about $1,000 to be put together, and can move about twice the speed as a normal sprayer and a third of the water. So into small batch barrel washers, and again, we move up both in cost and what can come out of them. The 5,000 to 10,000 grand, that price point is for these Wilsies, and many of you have seen them, and they're the good part about them is they've got a really high quality parts, stainless barrel that lasts forever, they're reliable, they contain sediment, and they aren't that cheap, obviously. And this is from Heartland, getting Nora Lake up in Hanover, near Hanover area, Heartland. Okay, so yeah, adjustable. These motors are, actually, I'm not sure. This is, yeah, that's showing the motor there. If you are, there's a lot of folks that like to experiment or don't have a lot of money, and so there's a lot of good options for these smaller barrel washers. And this is a great example because it's also from Footprint. You'll notice these closet racks in the background, and they often are mostly doing bunches through the season. But then this time of year, all of a sudden, they've got a few tons of carrots and other roots coming in, and they've got to do larger batches. So they set this up, and they're, again, mostly retail, but the seasonal crunch, and they got young bodies in good shape and like to bicycle. So they've done some pretty cool things. A lot of people have done stuff like that. And in fact, you don't even really, I mean, a lot of people use motors, but I have seen either bicycles or this is from Shintali Farm in Mansfield, Connecticut, Ed Wazer. And this is it's a nice setup with bicycle rims and a home built kind of pusher and a bread basket. And then, there's no motor. You don't see a motor, but he does have the water set up. There's no real angle per se. I think it's a one batch wash, and he's basically turning it by hand. But it looks like it works well, and then he pulls it out. So larger batch washers, key points we'll get into, but they can, from 600, probably usually 600 to 1,200 pounds per hour is kind of what you're looking at. 2,000 would be a bare bones. You could build them yourself for probably 1,000, and they can get pretty expensive. I think 20 grand was the Polish model that Pete Screens just got, but they sunk at least 80 into their line. So again, good for pulling out large amounts of stuff. So pretty simple design. Often it is key to go for smaller spaces here. This is a prototype built by Robert Haddad from Cornell, and keeping these at more like 1/8 of an inch, I think, rather than, or 1/4 to 1/8, rather than any bigger, will keep small carrots or things from getting stuck. Having something that's easily cleanable is important, and having brushes and curved brushes are the best that can clean this out. A lot of people put various pieces of things in there to help the carrots tumble, and there are potentially ways to do that that are easier to clean. All right, you have a bar with holes drilled frequently to spray the water with. Wrong way. So some of the key lessons learned, and I've talked to a lot of growers and seen different things. This, adjustability, durable surfaces, those are some of the key things, and sediment and water management. So making it ergonomic, being able to adjust, because the rounder roots are going to roll really easily, but carrots will have a hard time going through. So if you're going to try to get product through the barrel washer, either you need a slope or you need to push it through, and the slope has to be adjusted for the type of vegetable. So in this case, you'll see both of these have different kinds of adjustability, right? In this case, on the left, we've got Last Resort Farm with 4x4 posts that they could just increase and crank up the thing. And here at Golden Russet Farm, they have cinder blocks that they can move around. Neither of these are like really slick, but they're all there. And if you look at this Last Resort, this sprayer is at one height, which can be just fine. Many people have gone with this other kind of sprayer arm, which can be adjusted potentially as needed. I'm not sure that it ever gets adjusted, but that maybe is a good option. And motors, I don't have a lot of info on motors. Chris, you might be able to answer some questions on that if we have them. Okay, what's the difference between these two? So if you're looking they're both sort of similar barrels made from wood, right? Wood is not really cleanable or sterilizable, but Vern says one has carrots in it. He's very astute. But wood can be washed, and you'll see these, right? These are relatively clean with a scrub brush, and they can work really well. This one on the left from Last Resort is as a typical PVC spray hose. This one on the right from My Food does not. There's no sprayer. And what that means, and Andy was telling me, I think this is a flat unit. So it's well designed, the dump, right? So it's been cut, it's been scribed, so carrots don't fall through. All that's good. They sort of hang out there because they're not moving along, and they're sprayed from this end. Okay, I guess some pictures here. Here's pulling it through, but there's no angle on this thing. And the spray, I guess it's getting sprayed from the either one side or the other with the hose. Pressure spray hose. I think that's Andy's camera there, is my guess. So that's an interesting system. I'm not sure how it works, but they're running it, turning it. Let's look at a couple really dialed in ones, and we're getting towards the end here, and I'll turn it over to Andy soon. You've seen this picture before, but I want to return to it because it's got like all these things. All these things are sort of dialed in, and Andy's saying it's made with 1x4 boards. Oh, actually, yeah, I wanted to point that out. This is a good setup for. You'll notice these 1x4 boards that are inset. These are even smaller, perhaps. Anyways, it's a tumbler. They're tumbler boards, but they're set in such a way that they're easier to clean. There's going to be buildup in these crevices, cracks here, but generally speaking, you could scrub in and clean that out pretty well.
So Hans,
Yeah,
I would just say that a lot of folks have moved to making those tumbler bars removable as well, more easily removable. Just getting back to the hygienic design piece. So instead of using deck screws, think about through bolting with wing nuts or something like that, so that you can take those off more easily.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so this is putting a lot of these things together that we're talking about. There's good lighting. It's actually 4 seasons, so they're warm. They can operate in the, in modest clothing. Angle adjustments they're all switch controlled, both the angle and the water. And Robert, who's the son here, he's gotten into a lot of this stuff and has done a great job for them. So this is on a little winch, which is switch controlled, and for the angle, and water is also controlled from the right end here where the packing and sorting happens. So yeah, we got good sediment catching that's going on here, sediment and water down into the drain, and then this packing sorting area, which is rimmed and washable, and then good ergonomic design with the bins right to the side. And they actually just made an improvement by having extra bins right under the table. I don't have a picture of that. So here's this in action.
Hey Hans, did you mention the hose reel?
No, but we should.
Go back a picture or two. So right there, see the red hose? That's on a retractable reel as well, which is a kind of getting back to creature comforts. That's a super nice little detail. That hose is on a ratchet reel, so you pull it down to use it. When you're done using it, it goes up into the hose reel. And Andy and I put together a reference on hoses and hose reels as well.
That's great. Andy, maybe you could post that in the chat. So this is just to see it in action. Things going pretty quick. Okay, here's another dialed in Cadillac from Route 5 farm. And we'll just look at a few things, right? They're outside, but good aprons, good quality aprons. And I'm gonna put in the chat, I've got some arrows here. This is now a test. So maybe just throw in the chat some of the things you're seeing, and the arrows maybe are little cheaters, hints of some of these real efficiency things that they've done. And I haven't seen anything in the chat yet. Maybe I can't. This is the inside. Let's see. No, I'm not seeing too much chat here. Well, you got all the answers right. On wheels, things can be moved really easily. Good sediment management with on a slab and crushed stone. Height adjustments easy. Ergonomic adjustable height for the dumping bins, and also on this side for packing and sorting. And then we have a bag packer over here on the right side as well. Adjustable bars here, and hoses more or less off the ground or out of the way outside. Good attention to detail. These guys do a great job. Look at the bin dumper is nicely scribed in there. Okay, a couple large volume lines. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there's way too much, but you know, if you're into mechanical harvesting, you're putting out thousands of pounds, and you've got, you know, large volume, high stress. Again, having bigger barrels and you know, hygienic design here is, you know, moving away from wood to semi-washable things. We still have a lot of problems here with the tumblers. Again, what Chris is saying is it'd be great if these could be easily removed with either some kind of a quick release or hand release from the outside, so cleaning could happen. This is at Jericho Settlers Farm. Oops, backwards. So a lot of mechanical harvesting, you know, there's a trade-off. So you're picking up a lot more sediment and a lot more seconds. Krista was saying that, you know, in a bin that weighs 800 pounds, she's getting 550 pounds of number ones, and then about 200 or 300 pounds of 200 pounds of seconds or babies, and then a couple hundred pounds of sediment. So it's quite a lot. So how do you deal with that? This is the underside of, we've seen the top side of this. It was kind of rusted, but being able to drain these things underneath, it's important. Cleaning, again, with, you know, careful attention to detail. Difficult to get into here, but cleanable, right? You can get in there with a brush and detergent and scrub that thing pretty well. High pressure nozzles are often better if you're, you know, you can dial in the pressure differently. And adjustable height as well. This isn't ideal, but it works for them. And they're, of course, dumping, this is that same picture we've seen before. There's a brush that they use for cleaning. And they've got a bin dumper and a conveyor lift as well. So big system. They're doing, you know, again, it's about 1,200 pounds, 1,000 pounds an hour, but that's sorted and washed. So they're, you know, in bag, they're doing everything in this line. And recently they got a rinse conveyor as well. It, again, versatile piece of equipment. It does a lot of different things. Like they're running the carrots through this barrel. I haven't seen this, but Andy was saying that they also often will finish them through the rinse conveyor because it's so easy. All right. So peat screens, and then turn it over to Andy to look at rinse conveyors. They're, you know, probably in terms of production rate, well, I think the highest in Vermont, or at least that I've heard. This is their old barrel washer, and I actually don't know where this thing came from, but I've seen this in action. One of the main problems that they had with the mechanical harvester in high clay soils is that just dealing with all the sediment, they're inside, and boy, you walk in there and it's like you're in some sort of a mud pit. So, you know, this is a higher volume system, obviously probably moving up another couple thousand pounds or a ton or two per hour, and conveyors, bin dump as well. So this requires a lot of people for, you know, it's probably four people on this line, never mind people cleaning up, and there's a lot of packing that's going on. And these guys are working in a pretty cool environment over many hours, and just keeping things clean and good flow is their major job. So recently, I guess last year, Pete got a upgraded unit, and this is a recycled water unit, and it has a derocker on it, which is this whole front section. There's a whole another section that's taking taking a lot of the sediment and the rocks out. And this is, it's hard to see this, but if you, on the left-hand picture, there's like a black bag that's over a huge pipe. And that's where the sediment can be blasted out of there. And you see all the stones and rocks and mud and the shovel sitting there. And they're taking out at least 200-300 pounds of sediment per bin, and putting it back in bins and then bringing it out onto the field again. So it's a whole nother system to just deal with that mechanical harvester. But boy, they can harvest carrots quickly. At least 10-time increase in harvesting rate. And they're running, on a good day without too many seconds. Pete was saying that 10,000 pounds are going through here per hour. So that's 10 times more than a normal barrel washer under good conditions. And there's a lot of cleanup though, and a lot of sorting. So there are other things that are going on here. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Andy. Maybe just pause for a second if anyone has questions. I know we're into this. There's a lot of photos, a lot of stuff coming. So we'll pause for a second before Andy can take over here.
Hans, I don't have the slides, so you'll have to run the presentation, and I can chat to him.
Yep. Okay. I mean, we could do a little switch over, but I'm happy to run it. You can just tell me when to. Oh, share. Look at that. Are you able
Yep.
to share? All right. So you can drive, and I'll get out of here.
Yeah, I don't think I can drive. You're the one sharing, but I can chat to it. So this is the AZS rinse conveyor. It's a fun tool that has been around on the market for a little bit. And I got a good tour of it a couple years ago from Dave Pauk at Sassafras Creek Farm down in Maryland. That's where these photos came from. He was the first one that we heard that had it. So we were able to check it out, and it works in a couple different ways. It's got 3 different stages. And stage 1 is the low pressure, high volume rinse. So think of it like a shower head. Stage 2 has high pressure spinning nozzles. Think about that as like pressure washer nozzles, but on a spinner bar like a dishwasher. And then finally, it's got a low pressure spray bar at the end. That would be more like a mister irrigation head sort of thing at the very end. So that just kind of mists the final rinse before the product comes out. And this all goes on a chain conveyor belt. So it's got a couple different pumps. Takes quite a bit of water usage. That first stage uses recirculated water, so it's like a big tank on the bottom, and that just keeps the water flowing to really get the bulk of the mud off. And then the high pressure stage 2 and 3 are both freshwater inlets to make sure the crops are nice and clean coming out onto the sorting table. Next slide, Hans. There we go. So it's held down by a rubber strap, and that allows the unit to pop up. So you can open it like a hood, as seen here. And this allows you to easily clean out that recirculation tank. And yeah, it lifts on gas cylinders, much like the trunk of a car. And it can be easily opened and closed for clean out, which is just phenomenal. So much equipment is not designed to do that. A couple of features is it has a roll-off brush on the end of it to help guide the product off the belt onto the sorting table. And this is an accessory inlet shelf where you can set a crate down in order to load the product onto. Some people just stack up crates, others have a table or another conveyor leading up to it. Underneath that inlet, there is a pan there, which can direct water or dripping mud down into the recirculation tank. But if you remove that pan, if you're dumping a crate of really dirty stuff, some of that bulk sand and water, or sand, mud, and dirt is just going to go right to the floor and not muddy up that recirculation tank. So that's like a special little added feature there. That just shows, yeah, taking out that tray. Hans, did you include this whole slide deck? Probably. So this just shows the back. I'm going to go through this.
Sorry, I was.
This is a full slide deck talking about the whole machine. I will do a little bit slower paced recording of this at another time for those who have the machine. That's really what this is oriented for, those who have the machine, how it works. So I'm just going to fly over it as a quick overview for those who've never heard of the thing. So this is just a back side of the machine and clean out ports. Next slide. There's the power cords, 30 amp, 220 volt, much like a welder or heavy equipment would be. There's a freshwater inlet side on the outlet. There's the control panel right up there on the front, easy to access all the controls. It's got belt speed, start stop switch, mode switch, so you can control whether you want just the first stage, just the second stage, or all three running at the same time. You can easily drain out the tank just to pull the valve on the lower side. It's got a tie down points for shipping from Pennsylvania and an adjustable foot to level your space if you don't have a perfect floor. The spinner arms and the rinse arms are adjustable like we were talking about. So it's a toolless design, so you can just spin that wing nut with your hand to move the sprayer bar either closer or further to the product you're washing. It's a shot inside showing the low pressure stage 1 quote shower head style, much like the barrel washers. They have holes drilled in the bottom, and it works great as a hydro cooler as well as a rinse conveyor or a crate washer. And so a lot of people are using this to wash crates as well. This is the low pressure pump for that first stage. Yeah, keep going, Hans. That's the high pressure pump for the second stage, and it's got a pressure regulator there, which we show on the next slide. So there's the pressure regulator where you can dial it in, because whether you're washing something like zucchini with a soft skin or something like carrots that can really take some more pressure, you can dial it up. Those settings, there's a lot of dialing in to figure out which pressure works best for which crops, because you don't necessarily want to skin your zucchini. But if you've got really heavy clay, it makes sense to hit it with a little more pressure. It's just, like I said, this is a heavily detailed PowerPoint here, so that it goes into the details of maintenance tips and things like this oil sight glass on the pump. It's got float valves to control the pumps and make sure it never runs dry or overheats. Keep going. Just showing an inside float valve, adjustable tensioners. Keep going. There's a shot of the high pressure spinner bars. And some models have 2 spinner bars. So this is an option that's super helpful if you're doing a lot of bunched crops. So you can turn one side on and keep the other side off. For example, bunched carrots, you can give a high pressure spray to the root end, but not completely destroy the greens end. So that's a nice feature. That's the controller valve mounted right on the side of the machine. Those are the low pressure nozzles for that final rinse or the third stage. It's got access doors to access. There's spray bars underneath the machine as well, so the crop gets hit from both sides, and that's an access port for that. That's looking inside the access port, so that's what you can get to. Just a shot of the belt. When it ships with RV, antifreeze. If you've got any other accessories like wheels, those are inside the tank as well. That's one of the filters in the tank to pull out any sediment, rootlets, and things that could get caught, so it keeps it from getting into the pumps. Shows the pump inlets port. You might have to set up the spacing of the little bit exit shelf there, so that just shows the adjustment points to that. We'll skip through this, Hans. These are really details that users might need to know, but most don't need at this point. So key points like winterizing it before winter and making sure there's no water in it to freeze up is important. So this machine out of the crate is like $7,000. It takes about 2 to 3 people to run. You probably want to add in things like a sorting table at the end here at a minimum. Bigger farms like Jericho Settlers work with AZS to produce a whole wash line, which includes the soak tank to the barrel washer to the rinse conveyor to a sorting table or to sizers. So you can kind of build it out as your farm grows.
So it seems that, you know, relative to a barrel washer, this thing isn't necessarily a ton faster, but it's super versatile and very cleanable. Would that be an accurate statement?
Absolutely, yep.
I see Timothy, you're here, and I'm wondering if you're thinking about or what your situation is with sweet potatoes right now, and if you're washing them and what you're thinking about. I don't know if you're there and want to pipe in. Just give you a second, and if not, we'll move on. Right, maybe actually gone at this point. All right, so thank you, Andy. That's great, and we are actually don't have a lot of time, and I was hoping we'd have either some discussion or questions. There's some more photos of carrots coming out of the rinse conveyor sorting table. These are all Andy's photos, I believe, right?
yeah. And if anybody's considering one of these or have one and would like to talk about it or share their throughputs or anything they've learned, I'd love to hear it and chat with you. So feel free to send me an email. And if you're inquiring one, either reach out or browse our blog. I'll post that in the show notes as well, because we've got videos and fact sheets and a couple user reviews on the rinse conveyor itself. Just jumping back to the barrel washers, most of those wooden barrel washers we were talking about earlier were the Grindstone Farm kits. They're just under $3,000 and they're quite accessible, pretty easy to put together, and work for a lot of the small farms in our region.
Hey, Andy.
Yeah.
You want to talk real quickly a little bit about the user group idea that we kicked off around the rinse conveyors, just to give people an idea what's going on there?
Yeah, so we've discovered that there are quite a few users of the rinse conveyor out there. It's a quite unique tool, and like I said, it takes quite a bit of setup, and there's some nuance to it. And part of the challenge is the manufacturer is in an Amish community, so he's not necessarily online and as flexible in communicating all of this. So we helped pull together a user group call last spring, right before the shutdown, where I was in person with them, and we got on a Zoom call and chatted with different users and made a bunch of notes about things that other growers would like to see improved, and ideas that the manufacturer had to make it better as well, to highlight some of that. And that's where this presentation and that I just skimmed through kind of came from. And I will do a much more slower paced, in-depth discussion of that, which I'll share at a later time. Putting all that together for those who have the machine or just ordered a machine to help them understand how to get it set up and how to dial it in. So there is further work in the background going on about user reviews and case studies and working as a team.
Andy, it's Vern. I know that brushes can be hard to clean, so I was just wondering about that one brush that offloads the produce.
That's a good question. In short, it isn't necessarily needed, but it is part of the machine just to help ease the product off the belt. The manufacturer's thinking was that even though brushes are hard to clean, and this machine really kind of replaces the traditional brush washer, is that at that point, all the crops are clean. And so the brush really isn't gonna get very dirty because it's on the exit side of the machine. So that was kind of the thought process there. And I think those that have the machine could probably echo that that isn't necessarily a dirty point, but correct me if I'm wrong.
This is Tim. At least it's easy to access compared to the brushes of a brush washer.
True.
There's no reaching in there.
So Tim, do you have a rinse conveyor?
Yes, and it ends up being that the barrel washer is too rough on sweet potatoes. So the rinse conveyor is what is gentle enough and adjustable enough for the different types of soil.
Right. So that's been working for you?
Yeah, it does. You know, when we first got it, we weren't sure of how fast it would go.
Mm-hmm.
But we can, you know, two people can. We're washing about 900 to 1,000 pounds an hour.
Great.
So.
And that's comparable to the root washer that you had that was damaging the crop?
We actually switched from a brush washer to the rinse conveyor, and the brush washer took, well, it was like a longer system. It had the dunk tank and an in-feed belt and, you know, all this other stuff, and that actually was much longer. So the rinse conveyor is faster.
That's great. Who else do we have here? Just other questions, you know, that come up.
Hey, Tim, I think it'd be worth you discussing a little bit about your adventures with bin dumpers.
Yeah, we got away from using a bin dumper, you know, because they created more problems than they solved. All the effort of, had a bin dumper into a dunk tank. I guess the bin dumpers worked well. It took up a lot of room, but you needed, for them to work well, you had to have a soft landing for them to go into. And so the dunk tank was the real problem, where cleaning that thing is just, it is, that's really where there's a time suck, and finding all the potatoes that some float, some sink, and then making sure you had them all out of there. It would end up, you were messing around with it a lot more than, because we were kind of looking to automation for it to really go well, but we could never crack that nut.
And what are you using now?
It ends up that we are unloading bins by hand on the end of a small electric forklift to adjust for height. And one thing we did with our rinse conveyor, this wasn't really planned out, but the rinse conveyor comes with like a 2-foot in feed. On the in feed side of the rinse conveyor, it's about 2 feet. Well, we had asked them to make ours custom and make it 4 feet. And so we're able to actually comfortably unload a bin by hand onto that, and that ends up being, in the end, we're talking about whole farm systems, and I need someone in the barn with me. I was kind of going to just, I was thinking it was just going to be me washing, but then I was the bin dumper was really trying to figure out how I can do this all by myself, but a second person to help move bins around and work the farm ended up being the answer. Yeah. And we were just worried about it being ergonomic, and we figured out an ergonomic way to unload the bins, and that's the forklift and the right height and the length of the in-feed belt.
Got it. Was that easy working with them to do that modification with an EZS, the 4 foot instead of 2 foot?
Yes, it was. It was. They were reluctant to do it, but it's worked out really well. So.
Great. All right. Well, I think we're almost out of time here. I'd love it if anyone else had any comments or questions. This might be the last few moments, and before we wrap up for today. Okay, well, hearing nothing, I will move ahead and just, we're working to gather all of this together in all the types of equipment, different costs and benefits, and getting them together in organized places. So keep coming up with questions and shooting stuff our way, and we'll see if we can pull it together in ways that are usable for everyone. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. And if there's nothing else, we'll end things.
Yep, let's say thank you so much, Hans. And this will be posted on the VVBGA webinar site. And join us next week for presentation on steaming high tunnels to control chickweed. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Vern.